Good evening, dear listeners, and viewers too. Today feels like Christmas because KFM has launched an audio-visual platform whereby our listeners can tune in from wherever they are and see people that host their favorite shows. So now this is a time to attach faces to the beautiful voices we have been listening to. I welcome you, dear listeners and viewers, from wherever you are. My name is Rogers Magala. I am the host of the day, sitting in for Andrew Mwenda, the old man of the clan. With me, I have a thread of very experienced panelists and political commentators. On my left, I have Jimmy Odoki. Jimmy, you're very welcome. And on my right, I have Isaac Kayonde.
Thank you, Rogers.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
You are very welcome. With me, I have a Saturday Monitor with corruption scandal, Sheikh State House. We also have a photo here, the New Dawn, KFM launch audio-visual platform. You can get yourself this copy, How Uganda Built a Cargo Business in USA. Here is why creativity, mental illness, dovetail. There are very many beautiful stories in here. The corruption scandal that has rocked State House. We also have Kaziwe, the Member of Parliament of Kawempe South. You can get yourself this copy. It will be a very good read. Today we are going to delve into the hot stories of the week. We have very many stories that have taken charge, and we cannot flee from the most important story, that is the Uganda's independence, Uganda at 62. We also have one that has been making rounds about the misrepresentation by the population reports. We shall also have a look at it. Then we also have stories in our neighborhood, Kenya. So I hope, guys, we'll have to have a say on the impeachment that hasn't been successfully dealt away with, but we see what it really means for the politics of Uganda and also the region in the neighborhood. So we start with Uganda at 62. This Wednesday, Uganda turns 62. It's quite a young country, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Isaac, what do you think?
Compared to South Sudan, you know.
Yeah. In your lenses, what does Uganda at 62 entail?
Well, for me, I mean, it entails the fact that we've come a long way. Our journey has not been very smooth, but as you have seen, I mean, the commentary, depending on which side of the political divide you are, the opposition are claiming we are not independent. Besigye came out the other day talking about how we need to gain our independence from the black colonialists. Such sentiments, you know, really a lot of it is just whipping up emotion. But in the real substance of independence, we are very independent. Politically, we choose our leaders from the bottom. We are voting LC ones. I'm not too sure you see influence of the West in elections of local government up to LC5, or even maybe some little influence at the top in terms of presidency. But largely politically, we are independent. Socially, we are also independent.
So you started by saying depending from which political divide.
Yeah.
So would you want to declare where you are?
No, I will. For me, I'm very clear on which side I am. I would like to say that I'm looking at this in a more objective way. The thing about it is the fact that you can't hide the fact that, you know, we are independent politically, socially. Now, economically, that's another question. But when you look at that bit about the economics, the way, how dependent we are on foreign aid and everything, if you look at it in the context of Uganda, you will miss the point. Because largely, we have the same problem as Africans. It's not only here, it's in Kenya. It's, just recently in Kenya, where the IMF and World Bank had asked the government to, bump up the taxes, and the people were revolting over it. That's that you can't claim to be very independent if you're taking orders from international institutions like the World Bank and IMF. So, excuse me. So in the grand scheme of things, you can say we are not yet economically independent. We are dependent on foreign aid and foreign influence. Not even so much the fact that they are giving us money, but they are influencing our economic activities drastically.
But would you say that we have every reason now to celebrate?
Oh yeah, we definitely do. I'll give you an example. Today, Uganda's economy is the 13th largest economy in Africa, right? We were not here 40 years ago. We were not here. You see the strides. 5 years ago, we were, I think, 15th or 16th, you know. We grow, but we grow very slowly. How that growth in our economy translates to the local person is another debate altogether, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at that, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what Jimmy thinks Uganda at 62 looks like in his lenses.
Well, we had started off on a good note from independence, 9th October 1962. But along the way, leadership, you know, we had military coups. It's generally been a problem of leadership. If you look at it, 62 years later, the NRM has been in power for more than half that time from independence.
Close to 40?
39. Yeah, so how has it performed? If you look at from the period from independence, how when Obote took over, the things that were happening, then the coup by Idi Amin, then it was generally a problem of leadership, political leadership, that derailed the country off its path. So, but I think it's been since the NRM government came in 1986 with the agenda of the 10-point program. You can weigh how much they have done from the 10-point program vis-a-vis the period from independence.
So in your view, are you comparing the 40 years and the 22 years before the NRM government, and you think the NRM has done much worse than the 22, the governments that came before?
Well, it really depends. If you look at the indicators, I think, I don't know the corruption scandals, how they were like immediately after independence.
You had the corruption scandals of Obote and
do they equal what has happened from 86? You know, if you look at these monitors published a series of corruption scandals that have happened since. If you compare to that period in the past, and you know our adventure in the DRC and how much we had to pay, or the International Court of Justice asked the country to pay. If you look at those figures, and it's I don't know, I'm not an economist, but if you like just keep looking at it, what would you think could this government have done better? I mean, the president the other day was saying we shall crush this corruption. It talks about, when it talks about it appears the intention is good, but the implementation is a very big challenge.
Then Isaac says that all is well except the economic mishaps that we have. Do you think that is right?
Well, I think Isaac is right. We are really not in the... You know, there's a problem of neocolonialism. We don't decide many things. Even some things are dictated to the president. We are not that entirely free. Our hands are a bit tied up. Not only Uganda, though. It's an African and almost a global. It is, you can be independent, but they still control. You know, like they say during this year, early in January, when we had this very big, and then they're talking. Even the Secretary General of the UN was talking about the lending. You know how things are done that does not favor you.
Yeah, I mean, you see the thing. For example, I mean, Africans, we have the highest interest rates from IMF and World Bank. We get our loans at much higher interest rate than anywhere in the world, whether it's Middle East or the European countries or. So why that aspect? Why are we paying, as Africa, why are we paying more interest than the others? You know, because, well, they claim, of course, they're banks, they look at political risk and all those other things. But I say, you know, it's a tool, you know. to continuously keep us in this debt situation. You can argue we have had debt relief and everything, but people also need to understand what debt relief entails. They forgive us debt. Like you see, today we have debt that we have not utilized. Mm-hmm. So when the World Bank says we are giving you debt relief, they are simply saying these loans that you took that you are not using, we are taking them back. So people need to get those contexts, but that's a debate for another day.
Could you be shifting the blame on the stagnance and poverty, the leadership deficiency onto the West? Don't you think we have some things that...
No, we absolutely... Uganda,
have we done them right?
Uganda had what you'd call a false start at independence. I didn't want to... when I'm discussing independence, I tend to want to look around the fact that we look around the region, because independence for Uganda was not a unique thing. It was around the same time African countries were being given independence. We are the only... In East Africa, we are the only country which we never fought for our independence.
But I think we did.
We did. In 59, we had the so-called...
riots.
No, they were not riots per se. They were kind of like civil disobedience. Huh?
In 49, 45, 49, the economic disobedience.
There were those economic disobedience things, but we never had a war like, say, the Mau Maus fighting for their independence. We never had what the Tanzanians had. What were they? Maji? No, I'm not too sure. I've forgotten the name.
Tanzanians.
Maji, I think. We never had that, Then secondly, when you look at independence, we are the only East African country that went into independence with political parties. In 1959, I was watching this interview. It's on the internet if you want. Nyerere, brilliant mind. I don't know how people do not glorify this man.
But there's an attempt to make him...
Yeah, I think. Yeah, he was really special. So in 1959, he went to the UK, and he was asked by the BBC reporter then, that are you going to allow other people to express themselves through political parties in Tanzania as a form of pushing up democracy? He asked the reporter, he asked her, we are getting independence. Which African knows how to govern, how to run government? Mm-hmm. He asked her that and said, look, what makes you think that if we are one party, political party, we cannot exercise democracy by choosing our leaders to be in this? So for him, he was like, for coherence and us to get the experience of running our government, we need to have one singular vehicle. So they had the TANU. Everybody, it was a one-party state until I think 89, or when he retired. Then it transformed into Chama Cha Mapinduzi, and then later transformed. But that was after, from 1963 to when he retired, I think 89. To this day, Magufuli almost took it back to one-party state, right? Kenya, KANU, what's his name? Kenyatta and Odinga, they fought and then they were locked up and then they came in and it was KANU. Kenya for 50 years never had an election.
But don't you think all these countries are unique in their own way? You can look at the first country that got independence in Africa, Ghana.
Yeah. What I'm really alluding to,
that is violent.
What I'm alluding to is that, look, if we are to go and compare ourselves with the region where we were and how we kicked off. Now, between us when we got independence 1962 to 86, we had over 7 presidents. Yeah. We could hardly have a government stay there for even more than 5 years.
But then we have one president that has led close to 40 years.
Yes, but you also have to understand that he operated under the most stable period. He operated under one party. That was between 1986 up to 96. We operated under the movement system. There were no parties, right?
But also parties came in 2005.
As we go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. From 1986 to 2005, we were operating on the movement.
Isaac, you hold it there, and we shall get back to Jimmy when we come back from the break on the same issue. If we really have self-governance And
The
if we
hottest
really
debate on all.
welcome back, our dear listeners and viewers. With me, I still have Jimmy Odoki and Isaac Yonde. We were still looking at Uganda at 62. Jimmy, we have very many people that have written opinions. One here into tomorrow's issue says, 62 years later, Uganda still unborn. We have very many others that were saying Uganda was much better during as a protectorate than it is right now. So what do you think this self-governance is? Do you agree with them? Or we've made some strides?
So, unfortunately, we are all young. Yeah. If you speak to someone who was there, I've spoken to Ambassador Harold Chema, he's written about it, the excitement, So some people have that nostalgia that things were, after independence, things were really good. And
but what people fail to remember that even under the British, we were being led under the barrel of the gun. We had the roads and maybe somehow economically empowered, but there was violence.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing about independence, like I said, it was not a unique phenomenon to Uganda. That it was something that it was a phase, just like in the Caribbeans, their independence came much later. I think.
But do you know that Jamaica also got independence in 1962?
Maybe
a few months, I think in April.
Jamaica? Okay,
Yes.
well, there were the islands, those other islands, St. Vincent, and those other islands got their independence in the 70s.
The independence did not come as a voluntary move from the colonialists.
Yeah.
It came under violence. No, they were forced to. We had, is it the resolution 1514, whereby they told every colonial master to give power back. That's why you see independence swept Africa in the 60s, mid-50s, 60s, and even 70s.
I mean, some states refused. I mean, South Africa refused, stayed there. Zimbabwe refused, they stayed there. I think those ones were much later because they had that white settler influence. I mean, presence was much later.
South Africa and Egypt, they are kind of exceptional because South Africa got its independence in 1910 and Egypt in 1922. But then
well, again, like I say, our form of independence is different. I mean, if you're looking at South Africa in terms of self-governance, and the white man was self-governing, he was a government of his own. But largely, look, we can talk about independence in the perspective of the history or the present, and maybe the future.
Now, if we're looking at the present and the future.
If we are looking at the present and the future, we go back into this political space, we are seeing a lot of the opposition, and I mean in many terms, the opposition running to the West for relief or for sanctions or for a desire to cut back spending to change government.
But not only, even the government relies.
No. And this is what I'm saying. You see, the government, for it's doing what governments do. If it is an economic program or economic, and they don't have money, they have to find it somewhere. So but you see, when we look at the opposition pushing an agenda that the West should intervene.
I would like to give you an example there. Uganda receives a PEPFAR fund to cater for HIV. For 5 years now, it's over $20 billion US. So how would you call that?
No, and that's why I'm saying that, look, governments have a responsibility to their populations. If the desire to grow your economy means that you borrow, or you look for support, and I must tell you, I didn't want to get into specific sectors, but that health sector you're talking about, PEPFAR, you said, and all those programs. First, they don't give direct budget support. They are not giving us money. They are running their programs, and that's why you find that their programs sometimes are not aligned with government programs, because they come into your country and say we are going to support this. But anyway, the story of how our health budget is largely sponsored by the US and all that is out of a discussion that happened in 2000 after the African peer review mechanism, where our government chose that for its citizens, it will provide 100%.
How about the military budget?
The military budget? What do you mean?
Yeah, Uganda receives support militarily.
Yeah, for strategic reasons again. And that's why I say, look,
Uganda is doing the bidding. A lot of the war on terror,
I know. Look, for me,
why do you divide it from what the
for me, what I'm saying, yes, and this is what I'm saying. You see, for government to, I mean, even if, for example, now, if you look at what you'd call direct budget support, which means money the West gives us for our use and where we choose to put it. We forget the way the projects, that they fund. You find it's very little money, and it's because of corruption and all those other things. So what they fund in our program, in our budget, are projects. So they do the projects and fund them themselves. So at the end of the year, we bundle that up and put it in our budget as expenditure for the country, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of very little, the money they give us for our discretionary spending, it's very, very, very minimal.
So on that, what do you think should be done, especially in scenarios where these people are misusing the mandate they have, the relief that they get that is meant to help the people?
That's why I'm saying a lot of these projects, for example, the Chinese, people have been asking themselves, look, do we have engineers or not? You get, why can't our engineers do the roads and all that kind of stuff? But you see, the money they get comes from China, right? Mm-hmm. China says, we are going to do this road, so we are going to give you a contractor to do this road. We are going to do this road, we are going to give a Chinese firm to do it, right? Which was different from World Bank and IMF. They give you money for a road and tell you, please, pick whichever contractor, but he must have these standards, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a kind of mix and match kind of thing for government. When you're in government, it's kind of different. But when you're in the opposition and you are saying, that's why you find that China doesn't interfere in your things. It's giving you money and that's it. Giving you money, projects and everything.
And it's setbacks.
Whether kickbacks or whatever, but they are not going to be participating in your politics of elections, right? Which is different from the West. But that's why I'm saying opposition parties. I'll give you an example of 2016. Amama Mbabazi comes onto the stage, traverses out there, goes to whether it goes to Dubai, America, and all those places. That when they were trying to get a singular candidate, they called Kofi Annan. And the auspices, they left Kampala, they went to Nairobi. They failed to agree in Nairobi, they went to London. That's where they agreed that Mama would be, the agreement I think was published sometime, that Mama would come. On reaching Kampala, basically, no. People refused. The FDC side refused, and that was it. But for me, it went back to the aspect of saying, look, the power centers clearly were not here, It was more of the interests of the West. What would they prefer? Now,
briefly on that, as we close on this topic, what do you think should be the focus? The Uganda 62 and going forward.
I think for me, it's a thing of we need again to say politically on whichever divide it is, let's look at homegrown solution for some of these things, because if we give power of influence, especially politically, to people outside this country, we lose our sovereignty, and where it goes, it can never.
Jimmy, you listen to Isaac seems to say that scenarios like the sanctions, he terms them as intermeddling by the West. So looking at what the opposition has been advocating for, accountability, against rule of law violations, human rights violations. What do you think about it?
I think the opposition is just doing the right thing. If your hands are tied, you can't do anything, and there are people who can rein in. And it's about accountability, human rights and everything. When the West, let me say, the other day the State Department issued these sanctions to these police guys. It's painful because some of them enjoy the privileges and it works. The opposition, what can they do? You go to the courts. The courts, okay, I don't want to talk about the independence of the courts, but if the West, even if they say these people, why do you have to go to the West? That's the only option you're left with.
But who suffers? At the end of the day, who suffers? Is it the government? Let me give you an example. When
you're going to the next election, if Museveni wants to use violence or the people, they'll know that they're being watched. There's going to be a repercussion. You're not going to get away with it.
And again, let me tell you, that comes down. I'll give you an example. Libya was under sanctions from the 80s till Gaddafi left, right? What happened? When he was hobnobbing with them is when he fell, right? What did it change?
Okay.
Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was under sanctions since 2000. Mugabe left when? 2017. Who suffered? The local people.
In this case, they are individuals.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Where have they worked? Kayura was sanctioned, and all these other people were sanctioned. So,
but the people who come after then know that we can't do the same thing.
No, I get it. You can't do that. But like I said, Sudan. Their examples are so many. You cause a situation like you sanction the head of state of Sudan, right? The issue wasn't.
Isaac, how can we hold people that abuse power accountable?
Do you know sanctions? They are used as a tool also for to rein in on errant dictators, leaders.
Well,
so it however much you disagree, it works. It may not work perfectly, but it has an impact.
Okay, in 1 minute, Isaac, what should be done to people that abuse power, political power, and instruments of power?
We have laws in this country.
Do you think the laws work?
Yes.
Okay,
but there's a lot of impunity. Guys. Torture, they walk scot-free. People do all sorts of things.
I'll give you an example, and that's where we might disagree.
We are going
that the law is very clear about. Okay.
Okay, guys, welcome back, and welcome back, dear listeners. So, Jimmy, we get back to the independence thing, self-governance. So, was it merely a promise in void? And then, don't you think our leaders need to hold some responsibility to where we are right now, instead of saying the West?
Of course, the West is just scapegoating. They have no solution. They can't explain, so you just say, the West, all those gay people. It's just, the problem lies with the leaders. And I think our biggest problem, since I talked about the corruption, I don't know, the figures have to be done to see from 86 and the past, compare and see the corruption. President says we'll crush them. So what happens if we don't? If this country doesn't deal with the issue of corruption, roads, health sector, many things happening, we will not get to where we want to be, or where the country wants to be.
Corruption has been on the shelves.
Corruption they can talk about in the past, but it's comparing the level. How much does it affect the economy? Look at the health sector then, the health sector now, and maybe in the past, how was it affected by the level of corruption? Or education then. We know after independence, maybe the population was not as big. It was a smaller population. Perhaps it was easier to get every people, jobs given. But now, I think corruption is even NRM when they were the 10-point program. Corruption is number one. Number two, dealing with corruption.
Do you think we still need to make a survey to know how corruption is started?
But because sometimes we just talk about it. We just talk about corruption. We do not know the extent. We just say, these billions were stolen. But I think
and for me, that's where the problem is.
There needs to be in-depth corruption, like research to show how it is affecting.
So should we conclude and say the government has failed to fight corruption?
It definitely. You know, what did he say during his speech at the independence celebration? Said we'll crush them. It's become talk.
Isaac, has the government failed to fight corruption?
Absolutely not.
The NRM government.
Absolutely. Well, one thing's for sure, and I keep.
Let me take you back.
There's no excuse. I have no excuse for corruption.
The president fought the guerrilla war. Fought the LRA war, fought the COVID-19, and for 38, 39, 40 years.
COVID-19 was luck. He didn't fight it.
Okay.
No, it wasn't luck. I
mean, everybody has their
Okay, do you think government has failed?
I don't think government has failed. I just think that the governing system that we have today will forever foster corruption.
At what point do you fall to the president?
What point? No, it's beyond him now. It is not. You see, once you individualize it to the president, then you will miss the point. That you see,
but you can
the
see
president
newspaper is the one who. It's not State House, those 4 or 5 people. It is just at the behest of the president that take action now.
You see, this is the thing. You know, one of the things, you call it endemic, pandemic, whatever it is, that, and I've told you examples. The corruption used to exist. Obote Amin in 70 had a spat in parliament over corruption.
But that doesn't.
That's one incident of the gold. You know,
it was.
That's one.
Listen,
that was magnificent.
Again, there was no social media to tell you the extent. But I will tell you this: world over, this business of reporting 10 trillion, we have lost 10 trillion. Do you know what 10 trillion is? 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Look, no country would you steal 10 trillion and that country still exists.
So now the problem.
My point is this: that when you read that,
exaggerated.
You see, I don't even say it's exaggerated. It is a report. It is how you calculate. It is those standards. They are what they call international standards of reporting, say, corruption. Let me give you a little thing. There's nowhere in the world they measure corruption by the amount of money stolen. Nowhere. When you look at how they rank countries, corrupt countries, they use what they call the Corruption Perception Index, right? They do their research based on a perception. So when they ask you, Jimmy, is there corruption in Uganda? You say, yeah. Have you given it? Yes. They go to this person. They use that because they know the perception is what drives corruption. So if many people think that there is corruption, obviously there's corruption.
I'll give you. If it's beyond the executive, then what should the people do?
And this is exactly what I'm saying. And this debate has gone on for far too long. How you fight corruption is simply by the fact that there should be consequences and consequences to that corruption, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a system where the president still holds all powers, it doesn't matter who is there. So do you expect
the problem should be
the problem is in the governance?
The powers
of the president,
which the Honorable Betty Kamya really made a very good analysis of that.
Yes.
The presidency is too powerful.
In many times,
even the corrupt, he forgives. You remember just this week, the bicycle guy, the one was
he forgives for he states whatever reason he gives it. It's not because he got money from bicycles or he got Kazinda that he sent people to go and steal.
Do we have the will?
Now that's one thing. The president has the will. He cannot afford the commitment. Those two things are different. That you see, the president has understood that there is a problem of corruption. His way to fight it is create institutions within institutions to fight it.
State House, anti-corruption.
Yeah, all those layers. Now, his is, you have to look at the broader picture. It doesn't matter how much you fight or fight corruption, provided, for example, a permanent secretary before 2015 was earning 2.5 million. Before 2015. Today, they're earning about 15 million. Let me tell you, if the permanent secretary is earning 2.5 million and he has a budget of 1 trillion, I don't care who you are, you get, but even if you are the Pope's brother, right? The expectation on you as a permanent secretary from the society.
Doesn't the gospel of patriotism work in that scenario?
That's why I'm saying, look, are we patriotic?
That is a question.
We aren't.
Is the president patriotic?
No, the president is patriotic.
How can we not be patriotic and then the president is patriotic?
No, the society that he leads is not patriotic.
So the president is the only patriotic.
No, he has deliberately, because he knows that is also one part of the problem.
How would you
he has deliberately gone ahead to do to fund patriotism and do different things around it, right? Now, whether he's succeeding or not, that's another thing altogether.
Isaac, how would you interpret his statement when he says that we have people that are doing mistakes, but if we do away with them, then who will we remain with? You get it? But these are people. He made those statements in regard to
Nembabati, I think.
The Speaker of Parliament. You get it? So if we let people go on with the mistakes they are doing, I was so happy when somebody had to pay in the Chitezi issue. You get it? So if we shouldn't wait for people to be called on, their heads get terminated.
Okay.
Why don't we get that element to fight for the country, goodwill for the country, nation building?
I'll give you, and this is the same thing I've told you. In countries like Singapore that Jimmy was talking about, public service, and I think in interviews of Lee Kuan Yew, he has talked about it. They were very, very, and it happens in very strict and progressive countries that are fighting corruption, was that they got their best into public service. And by getting their best into the public service, they also did one thing. They really paid for the best into their public service. Now, because of that, you got the result. Now, if you have a police officer who is earning 350,000, right, on the road, and he's there supervising cars of 1 billion, 2 billion, you get, there is no way you're going to tell me that officer is going to go back home, he has kids, he has everything. He will look at that job, with the exception of patriotism, he will look at that job as a means to survive.
Thank you, Isaac. Jimmy, we seem to have ignored the question of bad governance.
Yeah, governance is at the core of this problem. And in this, we can also talk about, I don't know, government staying 39 years. Is there a plan for transition? Will we have another mess like in the past, where, we have not had a transfer of power from one president to another here in this country, like democratically. So do we have that? There have been suggestions about dialogue and all these things. What? That is at the core of governance. If you can't talk to each other, you look at another person with suspicion. You can't. There's always, us against them, the haves and have-nots. So do you think if we have a peaceful transition from NRM to NRM, will change anything? Well, it has to be democratic. It can't be like someone's. People have to be involved in the process. It can't be dictated that from NRM to NRM. If the people elect an opposition political party president to lead, well, then why not? But it seems that the biggest problem is being too powerful, dictating everything. Shall we really have Isaac? Shall we?
Right there. Isaac will come in with the bad governance issue, the issue of governance after the break. Thank you. Okay, in our last segment, Isaac.
Yes.
What should we expect in the next year of Uganda?
Next year of Uganda? I mean, Uganda is good.
What should be the focus of discussion? What do you look forward to?
Well, in terms of independence, I don't think we are going to get any better independence. I mean, we are already there.
Okay,
in
focus
terms
on transition.
Transition. Transition, we always have change downwards, but we don't have change per se at the top.
Why?
Why? Because, and I have said before, I'll give you the numbers, and I've told you here, the numbers don't lie. 16 million voters in the last election were on the register. 10 million of them came, right? 6 million voted Museveni, 3-point-something.
And he said 1 million votes stolen by Nup.
Yeah.
So,
And what happened to those that absconded?
Now, that's my point, that you had 6 million people who never turned up to vote.
You see, there are very many things that influence the voting process.
I agree. Yes.
So
yes.
would you still justify your point?
That's why I'm saying. Museveni may not be the most popular person in the country, but certainly the most electable, because if I gave those
that's a subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. If I gave the 6 million that did not come, I'll give you largely, and I will take this for sure. The 6 million that didn't come to that election are people who have apathy with what the voting brings. So I will give those as opposition people. Let's give or take. Let's assume there were 2 million NRM people who were busy, right? 4 million. If 4 million of those people came to the polls, right? Museveni won the Nup by what? Approximately 2-point-something. If 4 million of those people who don't turn up came to the polls and voted Nup, there you'd have your change.
But you seem to suggest that the demographics are static.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Now, I'm just saying that the people who come to vote, vis-a-vis the people who don't come to vote, there is a huge percentage. You get a huge percentage of people who are not turning up to the polls, but somehow are expressing their disgust and anger to the winner. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So if you come today on social media, right, and you see the numbers of people who express their discontent with government, they are astronomical. They tend to outweigh or outnumber the government people, right? But for me, you cannot blame the winner for people who don't come to express their vote. In the next election, we expect it to be 20-something million people.
Thank you, Isaac. Jimmy, Isaac seems to negate the issue of vote rigging.
Yeah, that's the free and fair election is at the core of this. You know, the person you talk about is notorious for all the negative things about around, blocking opposition. You know what happened to the new people, the number killed, and you go to court, you get frustrated. Why did Bobby Wine leave, presenting his issues?
And then the other thing you need to comment on, I would like to know, do you think President Museveni is the most electable candidate?
Yes,
of course not. That is his opinion.
No. Why I will still stand is that for every election that he has come, he has garnered the most.
But was it free and fair?
This is what the court has said.
Jimmy, why do you think?
Even the court.
I'll explain the court, because you see, for me, I cannot argue for what I don't want to speculate.
I would like to know why Jimmy thinks Museveni is not an electable president. Most electable.
No, he's not as popular as he used to be. Maybe when he came, people. There's no freedom. People just do for the sake of. Maybe, there's going to be violence. Even if he's voted out, you think he'll accept that? Does it
make it any different from Obote and Amin? Or they are in the same class?
No, Obote was much
better.
I'm not sure for Amin, but Obote was. You can't, compare Museveni and Obote on the same level. Museveni knows violence. He hates violence right from university. What he did, fighting, bandit. But Obote was a man of eloquence.
Professor Ebike Kaswazi wrote and said that during Obote's regimes, over 800 people were killed.
Because Obote was not a military man. Obote didn't know how to maybe he was not in charge of the army like Museveni is. So things would happen, but he was not responsible. Museveni would hire, people in Luero, some of them have confessed what happened. So Museveni was, his theory of Fanon, all this, is a violent man. So Obote was, eloquence, articulation, and, reason, and all this.
Again.
The military wasn't his.
Would you like to make a statement on who unelectable candidate you think we have right now?
You see,
in the race?
I would give to Norbert Mao if
again, you see, I don't want you to misunderstand what I have said. By electable, I'm saying he has the ability to marshal and bring his supporters to the polls. And if you look at the polls from 96 to 2001, President Museveni has probably gained maybe about 2 million voters out of a population which has grown.
So what do you have
why it is important that you cannot remove the figures, because those are always the area of contention. Let me give you, the courts have persistently said, look, two things are happening, and I don't want you to construe my words.
Mm-hmm.
What has been happening is, and I know, is that courts have been consistent about having free and fair. And they have been consistent in saying this election was unfair. It was unfair in terms of resources, you get, from between government and others. It was unfair in terms of using state machinery. They have been consistent. But they have also been consistent to say that, look, what if you have what we can term what is happening is what you call voter manipulation, right? But as regards the voter numbers, right, you don't find, you fail to prove them. Today, I can give you an example. Today, the Electoral Commission has all the results. From all the polling stations in this country. They're on their website. If, let's assume the courts are so biased that we are not going to take this thing to court, yeah? Bring us the evidence for just the sake, and I'll quote Daniel Karinaki's book on Besigye.
As we wind up.
Daniel Karinaki writes in his book on Besigye of the 2011 election, where even the president of FDC, who was Mugisha Muntu, didn't call that election. They went and called, in the story anyway, is that Besigye left the European Union dignitaries, diplomats, invited Dr. Besigye, I think, on Lumumba, the Norway, Sweden, whatever, embassy. And he goes into this boardroom, and they all sit and say, look, we have looked at this election in terms of numbers from every angle. We don't see how you won this election. And Besigye, in all his
Isaac, now, is it true that the president has rallied his supporters to come and vote?
Yeah.
And also used force to deter those that don't support him to vote?
You can argue that, but what they are saying, the courts have been very clear. They're saying, look, yes, that happened, but by how much?
The magnitude.
What is the magnitude of putting a member there? You get?
Okay. Jimmy, yes. On the magnitude issue, don't you think this also speaks of judicial non-independence?
Well said. Non-independence, we've heard of stories where at the last minute some changes had to be, one person writes this ruling and then they may call me to, I don't want, but
let me say it for you. I know for sure you're quoting Kanyahamba. You get, and he also says it. They sit down, they create this judgment. It's a split decision. He had a spat with the late Dr. Mulenga over that election, where he claimed that Dr. Mulenga changed his
isn't it? Can't you believe him?
No, I don't believe Kanyahamba. I will believe Mulenga, because Mulenga said, look, we had that discussion, we had that phone call together. You get, I never told you that I was going to write.
Do you think the populace is disenfranchised?
Yes, that's why I'm saying, when you disenfranchise, how many people, for example, did not go to the polls? And this is what I've said. The courts have been very clear. Yes, we are seeing this unfairness, but the law is also very specific that once you bring that petition, you must also bring the numbers.
Okay, thank you, guys. We have to cut it short right here.
You didn't talk about the new party, the PFF.
Oh, PFF.
Front for,
maybe next
it might be providing the solution for.
But you think the solution is in Norbert Mao? You just confessed.
I
was being home based, but I think the intellectual.
Are you admitting on national radio?
Nice to thank you.
The intellectual is Dr. Besigye, I think.
Lastly, congratulations our listeners for this audio and visual platform. Happy weekend.
Yeah,
sometimes